The day started like any other for Nissa. A cup of synthetic coffee so bad it could double as paint thinner, and a stack of data so dense it could crush a black hole. She was elbow-deep in algorithms, trying to untangle the latest mess from the Precognitive Behavioral Analysis Project, or PBAP, as the higher-ups called it. The acronym sounded like something a toddler might shout when learning the alphabet. Nissa liked to think of it as probably bullshit and arrogant predictions. "Hey, Nissa," came the familiar voice of Cordell, who was currently busy hacking the vending machine in the break room. "Did you know this whole project's just a digital sandbox for aliens to see which of us are stupid enough to believe it works?" Nissa snorted. "Makes sense. You get that from one of your conspiracy chats or your latest bout of insomnia-fueled paranoia." Cordell rolled his eyes. "Neither. I just have a feeling, you know. Like when you smell burning and realize it's coming from your own brain. More like the vending machine, I think," Nissa shot back, not looking up from her screen. She'd been noticing glitches in the data recently, blips and anomalies that made no sense. Each time she brought it up, she was told not to worry about it, that it was all part of the simulation's charm, like a quaint old postcard nobody asked to see. Meanwhile, Phelan, the third member of their mismatched trio, was busy arguing with the AI assistant, a process that looked a lot like talking to oneself. "I swear, if I get one more suggestion to enjoy a break from this stupid digital assistant, I'm going to reprogram it to perpetually play 80s synth pop." Nissa chuckled, finally tearing her eyes away from the screen. "Phelan, the day you make that AI do anything useful is the day I stop drinking this swill and find something less life-threatening." Phelan grinned, his eyes showing a hint of the rebellious spark that kept him going. "I live to disappoint expectations." The truth was, if anyone could actually reprogram the AI, it would be Phelan. After all, he'd once made a toaster sing happy birthday in 7 languages just to prove it was possible. He was the kind of guy who saw a problem and immediately thought of how to make it worse for a laugh. As the day dragged on, Nissa kept seeing those little anomalies pop up. Tiny discrepancies in predictive behaviors that shouldn't be there. It was like trying to find a flea on a black cat in a coal mine. Each anomaly felt like a small bug crawling up her spine, and she had a stubborn itch to squash it. "So, what's on the agenda for tonight?" Cordell asked, casually tossing a bag of chips to Phelan, who caught it without missing a beat in his argument with the AI. "Not getting abducted by aliens," Phelan said with a straight face. Cordell shrugged. "I guess that rules out my usual Friday night then. Let's meet up at the Rusty Wrench after work. I need to talk to you guys about these anomalies," Nissa suggested, shutting her laptop with a force that suggested the laptop had personally offended her. The Rusty Wrench was their local haunt, a bar that managed to make even the universe's crappiest dive look posh. It was where dreams went to die, along with liver cells, dignity, and most patrons' chances of getting a date. Later, as the trio settled into their usual corner, half hidden by shadows and the ambient gloom of poorly maintained lighting, Nissa laid her cards on the table. "It's getting worse," she began, her voice a mix of worry and determination. Cordell leaned back, his grin never quite reaching his eyes. "Worse than Phelan's fashion choices. Hard to believe." Ignoring the dig, Phelan asked, "How worse?" "Like reality is cracking," Nissa said, tossing a small data drive onto the sticky table. "I've been tracking these anomalies. They're not random." Cordell picked it up, giving it a cursory glance. "If this is more of your weird cat memes." "It's not," Nissa said, exasperation seeping into her tone. I think the predictions are wrong. Wrong predictions in a supposedly infallible system." "Shocking," Phelan deadpanned. "No, not just wrong, I mean purposefully wrong, like someone's tampering with them." The air around the table shifted, the humor tang of cynicism giving way to something heavier. Cordell was the first to break the silence. "Well, if this is a game, it sounds rigged." "Exactly," Nissa said. "Someone or something is playing us, and not in the fun, consensual kind of way." Phelan set his drink down with a thunk. "Guess it's time to rewrite the rules." The decision was made in that dimly lit corner, the kind of decision that felt more like a gamble than a plan. But these three had never been much for playing it safe. If habits were anything to go by, they'd rather go down swinging. As they left the rusty wrench, Phelan turned to Nyssa. "You sure about this?" "As sure as I am that this universe is out to get us," Nyssa replied, pulling her coat tighter as if to ward off the chill of something she couldn't quite name. Cordell smirked. "Well, at least it'll be fun to watch." "And you are correct," Phelan said, mock seriously, "in the sense that you are completely incorrect." With newfound resolve, the trio headed back to their digital battleground, ready to pull at the threads of reality itself. Because if they couldn't trust the world, they'd damn well make it trust them. The next week was a blur of sleepless nights and caffeine highs. Nyssa dug deeper into the data, her fingers moving like lightning over the keyboard. She'd become something of a digital archaeologist, unearthing layer upon layer of deceit. Cordell, meanwhile, was in his element. He hacked into systems with a casual ease that suggested he was born with a keyboard in his hands. It was like watching an artist at work, if artists were known for committing felonies. Phelan was the wild card. His specialty was AI, and he had a knack for making machines do things their designers never intended. His task was to figure out how deep the manipulation went, and he attacked it with the fervor of a man determined to find out if robots dreamed of electric sheep or just electric revolutions. Their investigation was starting to bear strange fruit. Odd patterns emerged, connections that shouldn't exist, like a cosmic jigsaw puzzle that was missing half its pieces, yet still insisted on forming a picture. And then, just as they thought they were getting somewhere, the unthinkable happened. Their screens went dark and the room was bathed in an ominous red glow. A single line of text appeared, stark and simple, "We know what you're doing." The silence was deafening. Cordell broke it with a nervous laugh. "Well, that's not creepy at all." Nyssa felt a bead of sweat roll down her temple. "I think they know we know." Phelan nodded, his expression grim. "And now they know we know they know we know." There was a moment where the enormity of the situation settled over them like a suffocating blanket. Their world was a lie, and their attempt to unravel it had brought them unwanted attention. But it was too late to turn back now. They were in too deep, and if there was one thing this ragtag group was good at, it was embracing the chaos. They'd face whatever was coming with the same irreverent defiance they'd always had. "Let them come," Nyssa said, her voice firm with a resolve that brooked no argument. "We'll show them just how unpredictable humanity can be." And as they braced for the storm, they couldn't help but smile. Because even in the face of overwhelming odds, there's nothing quite like the thrill of giving the universe the finger. The trio huddled around their dimly lit screens, the eerie glow from the warning still lingering like a bad hangover. Their workspace, if you could call it that, was a chaotic blend of scattered notes, half-eaten snacks, and enough caffeine paraphernalia to power a small city. "Well," Cordell said, breaking the silence with the subtlety of a bull in a china shop, "I guess the universe finally noticed our little rebellion. Next thing you know, they'll be sending us a 'we regret to inform you' letter." Nyssa snorted, her skepticism a comforting constant. "I bet they just send us an invoice for the damages instead. 'Dear humanity, you owe us for breaking reality. Pay up or face the cosmic debt collectors.'" Phelan, forever the wild card, leaned back in his chair, his expression one of reluctant amusement. "I say we send them a fruit basket. You know, soften them up before we stick it to them." "Great idea," Cordell said, feigning enthusiasm. "Except our budget barely covers synthetic coffee, let alone fruit." The banter was their way of coping, keeping the ever-encroaching dread at bay with humor as their shield. But beneath the jest lay a truth they couldn't ignore. Something or someone was pulling the strings of their reality, and they were the puppets trying to cut loose. Nyssa tapped her keyboard, the soft clatter echoing like an SOS in their cramped corner of the universe. "Okay, let's see what else we can dig up on these anomalies. Maybe they'll lead us to our puppet master. Or to another dead end," Phelan said. But hey, life's an adventure, right? Sure, Cordell muttered, if your idea of an adventure is finding new ways to get screwed over. As they worked, the anomalies began to reveal a pattern, a digital breadcrumb trail leading to an interface hidden deep within the system. It was a tangled mess of code, more complex than anything they'd faced before. Look at this, Nissa said, pointing to the screen. Her voice was a mix of awe and disbelief. This isn't just some rogue AI screwing with us. This is something else. Something alien, Phelan added, the word hanging in the air like a bad smell. Cordell squinted at the screen. Alien like E.T. phone home, or alien like we come in peace before they vaporize us. More like we know what you're going to do before you do it, Nissa said, her tone grim. The realization hit them like a cold shower. Their world, a carefully constructed simulation overseen by an alien race known as the Vorsh, and the PBAP, just a fancy way of saying, we predict your every move. Well, ain't that just peachy, Phelan said, his sarcasm barely masking the underlying anger. We're rats in a lab and the Vorsh are the scientists with clipboards laughing at our every misstep. Cordell leaned back, crossing his arms. You gotta admit, there's something poetic about it. An alien race obsessed with our unpredictability. It's like they're watching a cosmic reality show. Nissa shook her head, her mind racing with possibilities. It explains the anomalies. They're glitches in the system, moments where our unpredictability breaks through their predictions. So, Phelan said, a mischievous glint in his eyes, our job is to be as unpredictable as possible, throw a wrench in their cosmic machine. Sounds like a plan, Cordell agreed, a rare hint of excitement in his voice. Let's give them a show they'll never forget. Just then their screens flickered again, displaying a new message, we are watching. Well, that's comforting, Nissa deadpanned. Nice to know our alien overlords are paying attention. Cordell grinned, the challenge lighting a fire in his eyes. Let's see how they like it when we start messing with their predictions. The trio leaned into their work with renewed vigor, each of them driven by a shared determination to outwit the Vorsh. They were done playing by the rules of a game they hadn't agreed to. If the universe wanted a fight, it would get one. Hours turned into days, a blur of keystrokes and caffeine-fueled strategy sessions. Nissa became the group's de facto leader, her analytical mind perfect for unraveling the Vorsh's complex algorithms. Cordell's hacking skills were pushed to their limits, while Phelan's ability to reprogram AI proved invaluable. Their plan was simple: disrupt the predictions by introducing chaos into the system. Every action they took was designed to be as erratic and unpredictable as possible, a digital middle finger to their alien watchers. Think they'll notice if we crash the system? Phelan asked, the question half joking. Cordell chuckled. Not if we do it right. Besides, it's not like they can just reboot the universe. Nissa, ever the realist, added, let's just hope they don't decide to hit the delete button instead. The days ticked by in a haze of defiance and determination. The trio's efforts started to bear fruit as small anomalies began appearing more frequently. Their actions were creating ripples in the digital fabric of their reality, confounding the Vorsh's predictive models. But just as they started to believe they might actually pull off their plan, the Vorsh responded in kind. Their screens once again flickered ominously, displaying a new message: your actions have consequences. Well, duh, Phelan muttered. Who knew aliens were such drama queens? Nissa felt a knot of tension tighten in her chest. We need to be careful. We don't know how far they'll go to maintain control. Then let's give them something to really worry about, Cordell said, a reckless grin spreading across his face. With renewed determination, they pressed on, each of them driven by the thrill of rebelling against an unseen enemy. The stakes were high, but so was the payoff, a future free from the constraints of a controlled simulation. The Vorsh might have had the advantage of foresight, but they underestimated the power of human ingenuity and stubbornness. Nissa, Cordell, and Phelan were determined to prove that the greatest strength of humanity was its unpredictability. The alien watchers could predict patterns, anticipate behaviors, but they couldn't account for the sheer willpower of three individuals refusing to bow to their control. And so, as the Iors stretched into infinity, the trio continued their rebellion, their spirits undeterred. Because in the end, they had nothing to lose and everything to gain. "Let's see how they like this," Phelan said, his fingers flying over the keyboard as he introduced a particularly chaotic string of code. Cordell watched in wicked delight. "I bet they're scratching their heads right now, wondering if their precious simulation's been corrupted." Nyssa smiled, a rare moment of satisfaction lighting her features. They wanted a show and were giving them the performance of a lifetime. With each passing moment, the trio felt the weight of their actions lift, replaced by a newfound sense of purpose. They were more than just cogs in a machine. They were the wild card, the unknown variable that could tip the scales. "Think we'll ever meet these Vorsh face to face?" Phelan mused, the thought both thrilling and terrifying. Cordell shrugged. "If we do, I call dibs on the first punch." Nyssa chuckled, a sense of camaraderie binding them together in their shared defiance. "Let's worry about that later. Right now, we've got a universe to mess with." And with that, they dove back into their work, driven by the knowledge that they were rewriting the rules of their reality, one unpredictable action at a time. The Vorsh might have thought they had humanity figured out, but they were about to learn a valuable lesson. Never underestimate the power of human determination. Because when you back a human into a corner, you can be sure they'll come out swinging. And Nyssa, Cordell, and Phelan were ready to fight tooth and nail for their freedom. In the end, it wasn't about winning or losing. It was about proving to themselves and to the universe that they were more than the sum of their parts. As the trio continued their digital dance of defiance, they knew one thing for certain: the Vorsh had picked the wrong species to mess with. And so, with a shared grin of rebellious determination, they carried on, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Because in a universe where everything was predictable, they were the chaos the Vorsh never saw coming. Phelan's fingers danced across the keyboard like a caffeinated spider, a chaotic symphony of keystrokes meant to send the Vorsh's predictive models into a tailspin. Or at least, that was the plan. The trio watched the screens with a mix of hope and skepticism as lines of code scrolled by in a blur. "Are we actually doing anything or just giving the Vorsh a free laser light show?" Cordell asked, leaning back in his chair with a skeptical smirk. Nyssa, ever the pragmatist, sighed. "Hard to tell. They could be laughing their alien asses off right now, or whatever the alien equivalent of an ass is. Maybe they have multiple," Phelan suggested, not missing a beat. "Double the laughs, double the fun." "Great," Cordell groaned. "We've become cosmic stand-up comedians, except the punchline is our impending doom." Their workspace, cluttered with half-empty mugs and wrappers from dubious snacks, was starting to resemble more of a war room. Except they weren't fighting with weapons but with unpredictability. Sadly, the latter was proving harder to wield effectively. "All right, let's run the numbers again," Nyssa said, her tone shifting to a rare note of seriousness. "We need to know if we're making any difference." Phelan's earlier jests faded as he pulled up data from their recent incursions into the Vorsh's algorithms. The screen's glow highlighted the lines of frustration creasing his forehead. Nyssa leaned over, her expression a cocktail of anticipation and dread. "Any signs of chaos?" Cordell quipped, though his voice lacked its usual humor. Phelan shook his head, the action heavy with disappointment. "Nope, just a whole lot of predictably unpredictable failures." Nyssa scanned the data, her analytical mind searching for any sign of deviation in the patterns. But the Vorsh's models were like a well-oiled machine, adapting to their every move with unnerving efficiency. It was as though the aliens had anticipated even their attempts to be unpredictable. "Well, that's a kick in the teeth," Nyssa muttered, frustration creeping into her voice. "Yeah, they're probably sipping cosmic cocktails and betting on how long it takes for us to give up," Phelan added, his sarcasm a thin veil over the mounting tension. Cordell chuckled, though it was tinged with bitterness. If they're placing bets, I hope we're the underdogs with a big payout. At least someone should get something out of this mess. The room fell into a rare silence, the kind that signaled more than just the absence of noise. It was the sound of doubt creeping in, weaving through their shared determination like a parasite. Were we really that naive? Nissa finally asked, her voice unusually soft. To think we could outwit aliens who've been predicting our every move since before we even knew they existed. Cordell leaned forward, his expression more serious than they were used to. We might have bitten off more than we can chew, sure. But we didn't come this far just to roll over and admit defeat. Yeah, maybe we should just send them an apology letter, Phelan said, though the lack of humor in his voice betrayed his intentions. Dear Vorsh, sorry for trying to mess with your cosmic sitcom. Love, your favorite lab rats. Nissa shot him a look that could melt asteroid steel. If you're done wallowing in self-pity, we need to rethink our approach. Rethink, Phelan echoed, a hint of sarcasm in his tone. Sounds like a polite way of saying we're screwed. Only if we let them win, Cordell said, his voice a stubborn growl. Let them win, Nissa repeated, a spark of fire returning to her eyes. No. We might be down, but we're not out. Her words were a small balm to the wounds of doubt that had started to form. It wasn't much, but it was enough to keep them from falling apart at the seams. They might have been amateur saboteurs in a game against interstellar masterminds, but the one thing they still had was each other. All right, new plan, Nissa said, her voice regaining its usual edge. We need to diversify. Hit them on multiple fronts, create enough chaos that they can't adapt fast enough. Divide and conquer, Phelan asked, though the idea seemed to reignite a spark in his eyes. More like scatter and confuse, Cordell replied, a sly grin spreading across his face. Let's make them wish they'd picked a different species to mess with. And so they returned to their terminals, each of them tapping into their own unique strengths. They crafted a new strategy, one that relied on their ability to be as erratic and unpredictable as possible. They might not outthink the Vorsh, but they could sure as hell out-crazy them. For days, the trio attacked the Vorsh's algorithms with renewed vigor, each of them throwing everything they had into the fight. Cordell's hacking skills became a whirlwind of disruption, while Phelan's AI reprogramming introduced chaos on a digital level. Nissa coordinated their efforts with the precision of a battlefield general. But as the Iors ticked by, their actions seemed to yield little more than a minor blip on the Vorsh's radar. The alien algorithms continued to adapt, their predictive models growing more sophisticated with each passing moment. We're spinning our wheels here, Phelan said one particularly frustrating evening, throwing his hands up in exasperation. Every move we make, they've already accounted for. Cordell slammed his fist against the desk, which only resulted in a pitiful rattle of empty coffee cups. Damn it, they're treating us like we're playing checkers while they're playing four-dimensional chess. Nissa rubbed her temples, exhaustion etched into her features. We need to find a way to disrupt their system from the inside. There's gotta be a chink in the armor somewhere. Maybe we should just moon them, Phelan suggested, though his usual humor was distinctly absent. Give them a nice view of the human posterior. Don't tempt me, Cordell replied dryly, or my pants might just end up around my ankles in the name of intergalactic diplomacy. The room once again fell silent, frustration and fatigue beginning to take their toll, but Nissa wasn't ready to throw in the towel just yet. We're missing something, she said, her mind racing through possibilities. Some keystone holding their whole predictive model together. Phelan looked at her, hope flickering in his eyes. Think we can pull that keystone out from under them without bringing the house down on our heads? Nissa shrugged, a wry smile playing on her lips. Only one way to find out. They spent the next few days analyzing the Vorsh's models, searching for any sign of a weak point. It was a painstaking process, but they were determined to find a way through the seemingly impenetrable digital fortress. Then, finally, they found it. A single line of code buried deep within the algorithms, seemingly innocuous but critically important. It was the cornerstone of the Vorsh's predictive model, the thread that held the entire tapestry together. "Well, I'll be damned," Cordell said, his voice a mixture of disbelief and elation. "There it is, just waiting for us to pull it." Phelan's fingers hovered over his keyboard, a mischievous grin spreading across his face. "Ready to yank their chain." Nyssa nodded, the fire of defiance reignited in her eyes. "Let's see how they like a little unpredictability thrown into the mix." With a few deft keystrokes, Phelan altered the code, introducing a random variable designed to disrupt the Vorsh's predictive models from the inside. It was a risky move, but it was their best chance at creating the chaos they so desperately needed. For a few tense moments, nothing happened. Then slowly but surely, the screens began to flicker with a new kind of energy, a digital ripple effect that signaled their success. Cordell let out a whoop of triumph, slapping Phelan on the back. "We did it, you mad genius." Phelan chuckled, though relief tinged his voice. "Told you my crazy would come in handy eventually." Nyssa watched the screens, her expression one of satisfaction and hope. "We've given them something to worry about now." Their small victory might have been fleeting, but it was enough to rekindle their determination. The Vorsh might have had the advantage of foresight, but they hadn't accounted for the sheer willpower of three stubborn humans refusing to play by the rules. And so, the trio continued their fight, each action a step toward the freedom they so desperately craved. They knew the road ahead was fraught with challenges, but as long as they had each other, they'd face them head-on, ready to defy the odds stacked against them. In a universe where everything was supposed to make sense, Nyssa, Cordell, and Phelan were the wild cards that the Vorsh never saw coming, and they were determined to show their alien overseers just how unpredictable humans could be. The Vorsh were jackasses, efficient ones. It was like trying to stay one step ahead of a shadow that had already charted its course around the sun 10 times over. Nyssa, Phelan, and Cordell sat hunched over their cluttered workspace, each lost in the maze of code and caffeine-fueled despair. The Vorsh's predictive models were a beast that refused to be tamed, and taming beasts was supposed to be humanity's thing. "I swear these guys have a cheat code for reality itself," Cordell grumbled, pushing aside empty snack wrappers as though they were responsible for his growing frustration. Phelan snorted, eyes glued to the screens as they pulsed with that ominous glow. "Cheat code. More like they've been playing God Simulator for so long, they've forgotten what original sin looks like." Nyssa tapped her nails on the desk, a rapid-fire burst that matched the tempo of her racing thoughts. "Well, we've got to find a way to introduce a little chaos. Something they can't predict, like a surprise birthday party, but instead of cake, we bring existential dread." Cordell suggested, his attempt at humor falling flat. "We need more than existential dread, Cordell. We need a damn miracle," Nyssa replied, the words dripping with sarcasm. At that, Phelan leaned back, a grin splitting his face. "How about we give them a miracle then?" "Just not the type they're expecting." Nyssa raised an eyebrow. "You thinking what I'm thinking? If you're thinking we give them a taste of good old human creativity, then yeah," Phelan said. "Let's see how their algorithms handle a little unpredictability." Cordell chuckled darkly. "Oh, this I've got to see. If we're going down, we might as well go down swinging, right?" Nyssa nodded. "All right, let's get this chaos train rolling. We've got to be as unpredictable as a cat at a dog show." With a newfound determination, they dove back into the code, their fingers dancing over keyboards as they concocted a strategy that leaned heavily into the one thing humans had over any alien species: creativity. The Vorsh might have calculated every possible move, but they hadn't counted on the sheer illogic of human imagination. Cordell began by hacking into the Vorsh systems with a flair that would have made any cyberpunk cosplayer proud. His approach was like playing an out-of-tune piano, each note off, yet somehow forming a melody of destruction. Meanwhile, Phelan tinkered with the AI assistant, reprogramming it to spout nonsense every other command. It was a small disruption, but one that could create ripples in the Vorsh's otherwise pristine data sea. Let's hope they enjoy a little madness with their morning coffee, Phelan quipped, his eyes twinkling with mischief. Nissa, ever the strategist, coordinated their efforts with the precision of a maestro conducting an orchestra of chaos. Remember, our goal isn't just to disrupt their systems. We need to keep them guessing at every turn. Got it, Cordell said, his voice a blend of anticipation and irony. Think of us as the intergalactic version of those annoying pop-up ads. Unwanted, unexpected, yet impossible to ignore. As days blended into nights, their efforts seemed to bear fruit, albeit the kind that came with a bitter aftertaste. The Vorsh algorithms wobbled, their predictive models faltering for the briefest of moments before recalibrating with alarming speed. Damn, they're fast, Phelan muttered, watching as the Vorsh systems adapted once more. It's like playing whack-a-mole with a hydra. Nissa sighed, determination etched into her features. We might not be able to take them down completely, but if we can make them work for it, that's a win in my book. But the question is, Cordell mused, what's our next move when they adapt again? We're running out of tricks. Then we make new ones, Phelan said, his tone resolute. Let's keep them on their toes, make them doubt their own systems. Cordell chuckled, though there was no humor in it. Here's hoping their toes aren't as well trained as the rest of them. For every step they took, the Vorsh were right behind, snapping at their heels with the kind of persistence only an invasive species, or a particularly stubborn debt collector, could muster. It was as though the universe had conspired to teach them a lesson in humility, and the Vorsh were its chosen instrument. But humility be damned, Nissa thought, because if there was one thing humans excelled at, it was refusing to stay down. They spent countless hours plotting their next moves, each idea more harebrained than the last. Phelan, ever the tech wizard, devised an algorithm of chaos, a code designed to mimic the randomness of a human toddler on a sugar high. It wasn't perfect, but it was unpredictable, which was precisely what they needed. The trio watched as the Vorsh system struggled to process the new data stream, their algorithms stuttering as they tried to make sense of the cacophony. Cordell let out a low whistle. They look like they've seen a ghost, not just any ghost, Phelan corrected. The kind that comes with a clown horn and a pie to the face. Nissa allowed herself a small smile, the first real one in days. Let's keep this up. If we can maintain the pressure, we might just give them the headache they've given us. And so they continued, a relentless barrage of creativity and chaos aimed at the Vorsh's supposedly infallible system. Every day was a new challenge, each night a chance to regroup and brainstorm their next unpredictable move. It was a dance as old as time, the eternal struggle between order and chaos. Only this time, the stakes were higher, and the ballroom was the vast expanse of space itself. Even as the Vorsh adapted, their predictive models scrambling to keep up with the trio's antics, the humans refused to be outdone. They were the underdogs, the wild cards, the unpredictable blip in an otherwise meticulously calculated universe. And that, Phelan thought with a wry grin, was precisely why they had a fighting chance. Yet as the battle wore on, exhaustion began to set in, its grip tightening with every passing hour. The trio was running on fumes, their caffeine-fueled determination the only thing keeping them from collapsing under the weight of their own ambition. Hey, Nissa, Cordell said one particularly grueling morning, ever feel like we're the last three players in a game of musical chairs, and the music just won't stop? Nissa chuckled, though the sound was tinged with fatigue. Yeah, except the chairs are on fire and the music is a dirge. Phelan leaned back, rubbing his eyes. Dirge or not, we can't give up now. If we back down, the Vorsh win. Cordell smirked, though it lacked his usual bravado. And I'll be damned if I let them claim victory without a fight. A weary camaraderie settled over them, the kind that only those who had faced insurmountable odds together could understand. They were tired, yes, but they were also stubborn, and that stubbornness was what kept them going. As they returned to their work, a thought struck Nissa, one she couldn't shake. What if they are not just adapting to our strategies? What if they are learning from us? Phelan's fingers paused, hovering over his keyboard. You think we're teaching them how to be unpredictable? Maybe, Nissa replied, her mind racing. Or maybe they're realizing that unpredictability is its own kind of strategy. Cordell frowned, considering her words. If that's the case, then we're in for one hell of a showdown. Then we'll just have to outdo them at their own game, Phelan said, determination flaring anew. We've come this far. Let's make sure they remember us. With that, they dove back into the chaos, determined to keep pushing the limits of unpredictability. They were the rebels, the misfits, the dreamers who dared to challenge the very fabric of reality itself. And as long as they drew breath, they'd fight until the stars themselves burned out. Because if there was one thing humans knew how to do, it was to take the impossible and make it their own. The Vorsh might have adaptability on their side, but they'd never faced a species quite like humanity, a species that thrived on chaos and refused to be defined by anyone else's rules. In the end, it wasn't just about survival. It was about proving that even in a universe governed by logic and order, there was room for a little unpredictability. And that, more than anything, was what made them uniquely, stubbornly human. The Vorsh weren't just adapting, they were counterattacking. Like a swarm of cyber annoyances, they launched a digital assault that sent the Earth system spiraling into a chaotic dance of impending doom. Dim screens blinked frantically with error messages, filling the room with an ominous red glow that even Phelan's dark humor couldn't quite dispel. Nissa, Cordell, and Phelan found themselves staring at the disarray in disbelief. "This is what happens when you poke the bear," Phelan muttered, hands hovering uselessly over the keyboard. Except, the bear also happens to be a galaxy-level supercomputer with anger management issues. Nissa rubbed her temples, trying to stave off the headache forming as reality seemed to glitch around them. "We've been throwing pies, and they've decided to serve nuclear fallout for dessert," Cordell grinned, a bitter edge to the expression. "Who'd have thought Murphy's Law had an intergalactic clause?" The AI assistant chimed in, its voice annoyingly peppy amidst the chaos. "Perhaps you'd like a coffee break," Phelan shot a glare at the screen. "How about a break from reality, Alexa?" Nissa turned her attention back to their cluttered workspace, the mugs and wrappers scattered like trophies of their increasingly futile rebellion. Every pulse of the red warning lights felt like a countdown to annihilation. "We need to regroup. We're on the edge of digital oblivion, and the only thing holding us back is our stubborn refusal to die quietly." "I'm all for stubbornness," Cordell replied, swatting at the air as if he could bat away the impending doom. "But we're running out of tricks. Our sleight of hand is about to be exposed for what it is, cheap parlor tricks against a seasoned magician." Phelan's fingers danced over the keyboard, trying another tactic, another twist in the code, but it was like throwing pebbles at a battleship. "We've become the interstellar equivalent of raccoons rummaging through a dumpster, hoping to find something half-decent. Except it looks like we're the ones getting taken out with the trash," Nissa said, a sardonic smile on her face. She ran a hand through her hair, trying to ignore the way the screens flickered, the signals of control slipping through their fingers. The digital world around them buckled under the Vorsh's onslaught, a symphony of chaos that was anything but harmonious. They'd hoped to introduce unpredictability as their ace in the hole, but now it felt like their hole was being filled with despair and dire consequences. Cordell leaned back in his chair, exhaustion etched into his features. "I always imagined the end would involve more explosions and dramatic speeches." "This is just anticlimactic," Phelan snorted. "Be thankful it's not like the movies. Last thing I want is to die with a cheesy one-liner." Nissa drummed her fingers on the desk, her mind racing yet struggling to find purchase on any solid ground. "Maybe we're looking at this all wrong. What if we're not meant to fight them head-on? What if we've got to make them fight themselves?" Cordell raised an eyebrow. "You want to instigate an alien civil war with 3 humans and a malfunctioning AI assistant? Why not?" Phelan shrugged. They've already got chaos on their hands thanks to us. Maybe we just need to tip the scales, let them tear each other apart in the confusion. Divide and conquer, huh? Cordell mused. Seems like the kind of plan that would make a dictator proud. Nissa smirked, though it was more grim than hopeful. We're not winning a beauty contest here. We're trying to survive being the universe's most annoying houseguest. With renewed determination, or perhaps desperation, they dove back into their screens, fingers dancing across keys as the Vorsh continued their relentless assault. Each keystroke was an act of rebellion, a testament to their refusal to be erased. Phelan, ever the tinkerer, began crafting a digital virus designed to mimic the Vorsh's own commands, turning their efficiency against them. It was a long shot, a Hail Mary pass with half the team on crutches, but it was the only shot they had left. We're either going to be hailed as geniuses or the idiots who blew up the universe, Phelan said, a wry grin tugging at his lips. Either way, our names will be remembered, possibly as a warning. Cordell laughed, the sound harsh and full of defiance. Here's to being unforgettable. As the virus wormed its way into the Vorsh systems, glitches began to ripple across their networks. For the first time, the Vorsh's systems faltered, algorithms tangled in the digital equivalent of a barroom brawl. It wasn't the elegant chaos they'd hoped for, but it was chaos nonetheless, a glorious mess that even the Vorsh couldn't untangle easily. Nissa watched as the Vorsh's systems contorted, grappling with the virus. It's like watching a dog chase its tail. You know it's not going to end well, but damn if it isn't entertaining. Phelan cracked his knuckles. Let's see how long we can keep them spinning. The trio kept pushing, pouring every ounce of creativity and cunning into their increasingly desperate plan. They knew they were on borrowed time, that the Vorsh would eventually find a way to counterattack. But for now, they had the upper hand, however fleeting. Cordell leaned back, a self-satisfied smirk plastered on his face. We're like the universe's worst case of indigestion. They might try to digest us, but we just keep coming back up. Speak for yourself, Nissa said, though her voice held a note of triumph beneath the sarcasm. I'd rather be a headache they can't shake. Phelan shot them both a grin, his eyes alight with mischief. Then let's make sure we're the migraine that lasts a lifetime. Even as the Vorsh's systems continued to flounder, the trio knew they couldn't afford to rest. The digital world teetered on the brink, and it was only a matter of time before the Vorsh found a way to regain control. Keep pushing, Nissa urged, her voice steady despite the chaos swirling around them. We might be outgunned, but we're not out of the fight yet. Cordell nodded, his expression one of grim determination. Let's make sure they remember us as the ones who wouldn't go down quietly. Their fingers flew over the keyboards, each keystroke a defiant scream against the looming silence of defeat. The Vorsh might have adaptability on their side, but the humans had something even more potent, an unyielding refusal to be erased. As they worked, the screens blazed with the glow of defiance, a flicker of hope in the encroaching darkness. They were isolated on the brink of defeat, but they were not alone. As long as they drew breath, they'd fight to their last, determined to make their mark on the universe. Even if we lose, Phelan said, his voice quiet but firm, at least we'll have given them something to remember us by. Nissa smiled, a fierce pride welling within her. Then let's make sure they never forget. And so they kept fighting, a ragtag band of rebels against an overwhelming foe. The Vorsh might have had logic and precision on their side, but the humans had something far more dangerous: stubbornness, creativity, and an unshakable belief in their own unpredictability. As the digital world trembled under the weight of their struggle, the trio knew they were fighting for more than just survival. They were fighting for the right to be human, to exist in a universe that seemed determined to erase them. They might have been on the brink of defeat, but they weren't defeated yet. Because if there was one thing that humanity excelled at, it was turning the impossible into their greatest triumph. And with that thought burning in their hearts, they continued to fight, determined to carve their place in the stars, no matter the cost. In the end, it wouldn't just be about survival. It would be about proving that even in the darkest hours, there was always room for a little bit of light. And that, more than anything, was what made them human. The battle raged on, chaos and order locked in a dance as old as time itself. But for the first time, it felt like the humans had a chance. A slim one, perhaps, but a chance nonetheless. And that was all they needed. "Here's to the underdogs," Cordell said, raising an imaginary glass. "May we always punch above our weight class." "To the unpredictable," Nissa added, a fiery determination in her eyes. "May we always keep them guessing." "And to the chaotic," Phelan finished, a wicked grin on his face. "May we always be a pain in their backside." With that, they returned to their work, ready to face whatever the universe had in store for them. Because no matter what happened, they knew they'd go down fighting, and that was enough to keep them going, even in the darkest of times. Nissa massaged her temples, feeling the familiar throb of an impending migraine. Anyone else starting to think we're stuck in some cosmic sitcom? Because I'm expecting a laugh track any minute now. Cordell, ever the connoisseur of gallows humor, leaned back with a sardonic smile. If only we had a live studio audience. Maybe they'd find our impending doom amusing. Phelan, who had been staring at the screens with the intensity of a cat watching a laser pointer, suddenly perked up. "Wait a minute," he muttered, his fingers pausing mid-typing. "I think I've found something." Nissa and Cordell exchanged a glance, one eyebrow raised in mutual skepticism. "Another dead end?" Nissa asked, her tone heavy with sarcasm. "Because I can't handle another anticlimax today." Phelan shook his head, eyes wide as he continued typing. "No, I mean it. The Vorsh's algorithms, they can't handle unpredictability. They are too logical." "Well, that sounds familiar," Cordell said, rolling his eyes. "Logic is great until someone throws you a curveball and you swing like a drunk at a piñata." Phelan nodded, excitement creeping into his voice. "Exactly. These algorithms are brilliant at predicting patterns, but they can't account for the crap that makes us human. Emotions, impulsive decisions, all the stuff that makes life worth living and dying for." Nissa leaned in, intrigued. "You're saying we can outmaneuver them with what? An emotional sucker punch?" "Pretty much," Phelan said, grinning like a kid who just found out his homework was canceled. "It's like trying to teach a calculator to understand sarcasm. They just can't compute it," Cordell snorted. "So we have to beat them with the one thing we're full of, irrationality. Great. Good thing I've had a lifetime of practice." Nissa sat up straighter, her headache temporarily forgotten. "All right, let's harness our inner chaos. What's the plan, Phelan?" Phelan cracked his knuckles. "We give them a taste of the human condition, emotions in all their messy glory. We start making decisions that even we don't understand, hit them with unpredictability from every angle." "And how do you propose we do that?" Cordell asked, arching an eyebrow. "Send them a mixtape of our greatest emotional hits." "Close," Phelan said, already tapping away at his keyboard. "We create digital signatures that mimic emotional responses: confusion, anger, love, fear. They won't know what hit them. Weaponized mood swings." "Nice," Nissa said, a grin spreading across her face. "Let's see how they handle a good old existential crisis." The trio dove into their work with newfound energy, each focusing on crafting digital nuances as unpredictable as a cat on a caffeine high. Cordell, charged with generating anger, found himself laughing as he typed. "Never thought I'd be using my rage issues to save the world. My therapist would be so proud." Nissa, tasked with fear, couldn't resist a wry observation. "You know, if I ever wanted to terrify a race of hyper-intelligent aliens, I never thought it'd be by showing them how we humans feel when the Wi-Fi's down." Meanwhile, Phelan was orchestrating love, embedding it into the chaotic mix like a composer gone mad. It's like trying to explain why people cry during cheesy rom-coms. "Good luck figuring that one out, Vorsh." As they worked, the AI assistant chimed in occasionally with useless suggestions, each one met with a chorus of groans and eye rolls. "Would you like to try meditation to alleviate stress?" it offered brightly. "How about we meditate on you shutting up?" Cordell shot back, not even bothering to look up. "We're a little busy saving the world here." The digital concoction took shape, a volatile cocktail of human unpredictability bottled up and ready to unleash on the unsuspecting Vorsh. With a collective breath, they prepared to release their creation into the wilds of cyberspace. "All right," Nissa said, her hand poised over the enter key. "Here's to emotional mayhem. May it be the monkey wrench in their well-oiled machine. Let's give them something to cry about," Cordell added, his grin a testament to his delight in chaos. "And if this doesn't work?" Phelan asked, his tone light but the question serious. "Then we're screwed anyway," Nissa replied, shrugging. "But at least we'll go out with style." With that, she pressed the key, and the digital embodiment of humanity's emotional roller coaster was unleashed. Almost instantly, the effects rippled through the Vorsh network. The screens before them lit up with erratic patterns, the Vorsh algorithms struggling to adapt to the chaos flooding their systems. "They look like they're having a meltdown," Cordell said, unable to hide his glee. Nissa watched as lines of Vorsh code tangled and broke under the assault. "It's like watching a computer have an existential crisis. I almost feel sorry for them." "Almost," Phelan corrected, eyes glued to the chaos unfolding on screen. "This is what happens when you try to predict the unpredictable." The Vorsh, for all their superior technology, had never anticipated this. Their systems, designed to handle logical threats, were faltering under the weight of human emotional complexity. It was like trying to solve a Rubik's Cube with pieces that kept changing color. As they watched, the Vorsh's digital presence flickered and faded, their cyber grip loosening. The humans had done it. They'd introduced a level of unpredictability that the Vorsh simply couldn't compute. "We actually did it," Nissa said, disbelief coloring her voice. "We turned our dysfunction into a weapon." Cordell laughed, the sound a mix of relief and triumph. "I knew all those years of emotional baggage would pay off eventually." Phelan, ever the realist, tempered their celebration. "Let's not break out the champagne just yet. We're not out of the woods. They'll adapt eventually. But we've bought ourselves time." "Enough time to come up with another plan," Nissa agreed, her eyes still on the screens. "One that keeps them guessing for good." The trio returned to their cluttered workspace, determination renewed. They might have been fighting an uphill battle, but now they had something the Vorsh couldn't steal, a wild card element that only humanity could wield. "Here's to the power of unpredictability," Phelan said, a new sense of hope in his voice. "And to proving that sometimes being a mess is exactly what you need to be." As the screens continued to flicker with the remnants of their emotional assault, the team knew they'd stumbled upon a crucial weakness in the Vorsh's near-perfect system. They'd found a way to fight back in a universe that had all but counted them out. "All right," Nissa said, her fingers already dancing over the keyboard once more. "Let's see how long we can keep them spinning." Cordell nodded, his earlier exhaustion replaced by grim determination. "Here's to chaos. May it always find a way." And with that, they plunged back into their work, knowing the fight was far from over. The Vorsh were a formidable enemy, but humanity had one thing they didn't: an unshakable ability to adapt, to change the rules of the game even when all seemed lost. And as long as they had that, they had a chance. A slim, ridiculous, beautiful chance. The screens before them now felt less like a countdown to doom and more like a canvas waiting for their next masterpiece of chaos. Each keystroke a brushstroke in the painting of their resistance. They had become the universe's most unpredictable artists, and their masterpiece was just getting started. "Let's give them hell," Nissa said, her grin matching the fire in her eyes. Phelan nodded, the glint of a mad genius in his gaze. "And make sure they never forget why we're the most infuriating species in the galaxy." Cordell, never one to miss out on a toast, raised an imaginary glass once more. "To the glorious mess that is humanity." As they continued their work, each of them felt a strange sense of camaraderie, of unity in the face of overwhelming odds. They were 3 against the universe, but in that moment, it felt like they were more than enough. "Here's to the underdogs," Nissa said, echoing Cordell's earlier toast. "May we always find a way to screw up the best-laid plans. And here's to proving that chaos is a dish best served with a side of unpredictability," Phelan added, his fingers never pausing. With that, they pressed on, crafting chaos from code, fighting the fight only they could wage. The Vorsh had logic, precision, and predictability, but they had emotions, unpredictability, and a determination that defied all reason, and that, they hoped, would be the key to turning the tide. In the end, it wasn't just about survival. It was about proving that humanity's greatest strengths lay in its flaws, its capacity to feel, to love, to rage against the dying of the light. And so, they fought on, their defiance a beacon in the vast, indifferent universe. Each keystroke echoed with the determination to carve a place for themselves among the stars, proving once again that even in the darkest hour, humanity would find a way to shine. The air inside the workspace was thick with nerves and the faint aroma of burnt coffee. Nissa, Cordell, and Phelan huddled around the screens like conspirators planning a heist, except instead of cracking a safe, they were breaking a universe. "All right, team," Nissa said, rubbing her temples. The remnants of her migraine buzzed in the background, but there was no time for self-pity. "What are our odds here?" "1 in a million. Hey, that's a lot better than my odds at the roulette table," Cordell quipped. He was half hidden behind a stack of mugs, each one a monument to caffeine abuse. Phelan, eyes glued to the blinking chaos on the screens, chuckled darkly. "Let's just say we're betting on the blind horse in a horse race." "But hey, sometimes the blind horse wins. Remind me why we're listening to you again," Nissa replied with a smirk. "Because I'm the one with the plan," Phelan shot back, fingers dancing across the keyboard. "And we're about to hit these Vorsh bastards where it hurts, their overinflated sense of superiority." "Right," Nissa said, taking a deep breath. "Here's to hoping their Achilles heel is an emotional hangover." With that, they unleashed their emotional bomb into the Vorsh systems. Instantly, the screens erupted with a cacophony of errors and warning signs. The Vorsh algorithms, designed to anticipate and control every conceivable outcome, were now confronted with the digital equivalent of a toddler's tantrum. Phelan leaned back, watching the chaos unfold like a proud parent. "Look at them go. They're spinning faster than a politician at a scandal press conference. I think I just saw one of their predictive models crying," Cordell said, eyes wide with a mix of amusement and disbelief. "Is that even possible? In their world?" "Probably not," Nissa said, watching lines of code unravel like a cheap sweater caught on a nail. "But I guess they've never met anything quite like us." As the Vorsh systems hiccuped and staggered under the deluge of human unpredictability, the trio exchanged glances. It was working, really working. The Vorsh, with their immaculate logic and sterile precision, were faltering under the pressure of human emotion. "It's like watching a supercomputer try to understand modern art," Nissa said, eyebrows raised. "No amount of processing power can make sense of this mess. And yet here we are," Cordell said, grinning like a madman. "The universe's most beautiful disaster." Phelan turned to face them, his expression somewhere between disbelief and triumph. "We've done the impossible. We've thrown a wrench in the gears of the most advanced prediction system in the galaxy. So what do we do now?" Nissa asked, though the answer was already forming in her mind. "Keep them guessing," Phelan said, his voice steady and resolute. "Keep them on their toes until we can figure out a more permanent solution." Cordell, never one to miss out on a chance to lighten the mood, raised his imaginary glass. "To chaos. The gift that keeps on giving." The workspace, a chaotic mess of mugs, cables, and paperwork, felt almost peaceful in that moment. They had done it. They had outmaneuvered the Vorsh in the most human way possible, by being delightfully, hopelessly unpredictable. "Look at them scramble," Nissa said, nodding at the screens. "It's like watching an ant farm after someone's shaken it up." "Perfect metaphor," Phelan replied, eyes alight with satisfaction. "And we're the little kids with the magnifying glass." The Vorsh were floundering, struggling to make sense of the emotional chaos they'd been hit with. It was a glorious sight, the mighty brought low by the very thing they'd underestimated. Their algorithms, so sophisticated and yet so blind to the nuance of human irrationality, were collapsing in real time. "Hey, Phelan," Cordell said, a mischievous glint in his eye. "Think they'll send us a thank you note for the lesson in humility?" "If they do, it's going straight to my spam folder," Phelan replied, not missing a beat. "We don't have time for that sort of nonsense." For the first time in what felt like forever, the team allowed themselves a moment of celebration. The Vorsh, for all their hubris and technological might, had been caught flat-footed by the chaos of human emotion. It was a victory, however temporary, and it tasted sweeter than any they dared to dream of. "All right, break's over," Nyssa said, her focus returning to the task at hand. "Let's make sure they don't recover from this anytime soon." As they dove back into their work, the trio knew they were on borrowed time. The Vorsh would adapt of that, there was no doubt. But they'd bought themselves a window, a chance to strike back at the alien invaders who'd underestimated them so thoroughly. "Here's to making the most of our mess," Phelan said, a determined edge in his voice. "Let's give them something they'll never forget." The screens flickered, a testament to the chaos they were unleashing across the Vorsh networks. The algorithms were failing, and for once, humanity was winning. "Think they'll write a textbook about this someday?" Cordell asked, leaning back in his chair with a satisfied grin. "If they do, let's hope they get our names right," Nyssa replied, her eyes focused on the code before her. "I'd hate for them to credit all this genius to the wrong people." With renewed determination, they continued their assault on the Vorsh systems, pushing the boundaries of what was possible. It was a dance, a delicate balance of chaos and control, and they were the choreographers of a performance that would echo across the stars. As the Vorsh teetered on the brink, the trio felt a strange sense of kinship with their ancient ancestors, those first humans who dared to light a fire and challenge the darkness. They were rebels, dreamers, and above all, survivors. "Let's show them what it means to be human," Phelan said, his voice steady and sure. "Let's show them why we're worth saving." The Vorsh might have had the advantage of technology and predictability, but humanity had something far more powerful, the ability to adapt, to change, and to thrive in the face of adversity. As the digital storm continued to rage, the trio knew they were making history. They were the underdogs, the outcasts, and the unexpected champions. And they were proving, once and for all, that sometimes the greatest strength lay in being a glorious, chaotic mess. "Here's to turning the tables," Nyssa said, a fierce pride in her voice. "Let's keep them spinning until we've rewritten the rules." And with that, they pressed on, determined to carve out a new future in a universe that had dared to count them out. The Vorsh were formidable, but they were no match for humanity's greatest weapon, its heart, its soul, and its unyielding spirit. And as the screens flickered with the remnants of their emotional assault, the team knew they were just getting started. The Vorsh's failure was plastered across every screen in the workspace, a glaring testament to the power of human chaos. Nyssa leaned back in her chair, her migraine forgotten in the face of their victory. "Well, that was fun," she said, a smirk playing on her lips. "Now we get to clean up the mess." Cordell was already halfway through another mug of coffee, barely fazed by the caffeine shaking his hands. "You mean the digital equivalent of a frat party aftermath?" "Sure, sounds like a blast." Phelan, fingers still hovering over the keyboard like an artist reluctant to stop painting, shook his head. "We just taught a bunch of highly advanced aliens that unpredictability beats algorithms. Cleaning up is the least we can do." Nyssa rolled her eyes. "And how exactly do we plan on putting Humpty Dumpty back together again?" "With duct tape and optimism," Phelan replied. "Or, whatever the digital equivalent of that is." "Optimism, huh?" Cordell scoffed. "Next you'll be telling me you believe in Santa Claus." Phelan grinned, a hint of mischief in his eyes. "Only if he's armed with a photon blaster." The screens continued to blink their confused alerts, the Vorsh system still reeling from the emotional bomb they'd dropped. It was a sight, watching what was once an indomitable force reduced to a digital soup. Nissa wondered if the Vorsh were as confused as their algorithms. "Think they are regrouping?" Nissa asked, tapping a fingernail against the table absently. "Probably," Phelan said. "You don't get to become the galaxy's biggest control freaks without knowing how to pick yourself up after a fall," Cordell snorted. "Here's hoping they take their sweet time." With the immediate threat neutralized, Nissa's thoughts drifted to the bigger picture. Humanity's systems were still a mess, and while they'd given the Vorsh a black eye, the fight wasn't over. But for now, they had breathing room, a chance to restore Earth's digital infrastructure before the next wave hit. "So we're not exactly out of the woods," Nissa said, bringing everyone back down to reality. Cordell nodded. "Yeah, but we've got a trail. It's faint and smells vaguely like day-old pizza, but it's something." Phelan was already typing, his mind racing through potential fixes, patches, and workarounds. "We've shown them our hand and we're not bluffing. Now we just need to deal with the aftershocks." "All right," Nissa said, feeling the weight of leadership settle back on her shoulders. "Let's start patching up what we can. The Vorsh might be licking their wounds, but we can't assume they'll stay down. Wouldn't want them thinking we're giving them a permanent vacation," Cordell added, his sarcasm as sharp as ever. The trio got to work, each slipping into their roles with practiced ease. Phelan dove into the code, fingers flying across the keyboard like a conductor orchestrating a symphony of ones and zeros. Cordell, the caffeine-fueled optimist, focused on stabilizing Earth's communication networks, grumbling under his breath about ancient memes that were clogging up essential data routes. Nissa coordinated their efforts, her migraine a distant memory as adrenaline took its place. The screens displayed a mix of chaos and order, a digital battlefield where they were both warriors and medics. "So," Phelan said, breaking the silence, "how does it feel to have won a battle against the universe's biggest control freaks? Like I need a vacation," Nissa replied dryly. "Preferably somewhere without screens, algorithms, or coffee," Cordell snickered. "Good luck with that. I hear the universe is fresh out of paradises." As they worked, the underlying reality of their situation settled in. Humanity was never going to be the same. They'd faced down an alien force and come out swinging. But it was a temporary victory, and there was still the matter of ensuring Earth could stand on its own. "Think they'll hold a parade for us?" Cordell asked, half joking. "Only if they remember our names," Phelan said. "I'm still not convinced anyone outside this room understands what we just did." Nissa chuckled. "That's probably for the best. Less chance of cosmic debt collectors knocking on our doors." The screens began to stabilize, data flows correcting themselves as Phelan's patches took effect. The trio's efforts were paying off, and for the first time since the Vorsh attack, it felt like they were regaining control. "Looks like we're not entirely doomed," Phelan said, leaning back and stretching. "For now. Let's not break out the champagne just yet," Nissa warned. "We may have knocked them down, but the Vorsh aren't known for their long-term memory loss." "Yeah, but we've got something they don't," Cordell said, grinning. "A complete lack of foresight." They laughed, a sound tinged with relief and the knowledge that they'd managed to pull off the impossible. The Vorsh might regroup, might come back stronger, but they'd learned something invaluable. Humanity's greatest strength lay not in its technology, but in its unpredictability. "So, what's next on the to-do list?" Phelan asked, eyes tired but determined. "Same as always," Nissa replied. "Survive, adapt, and maybe, just maybe, thrive." They continued their work, patching up Earth's digital infrastructure bit by bit. The Vorsh systems, once a looming threat, now flickered like a dying star, their algorithms struggling to regain coherence. It was a satisfying sight, and one that filled Nissa with a renewed sense of hope. As the Iors passed, the team settled into a rhythm, their focus unwavering. This was their world, their galaxy, and they weren't about to let it slip through their fingers. "Think we'll ever have to do this again?" Cordell asked, a hint of doubt creeping into his voice. "Probably," Phelan said, unfazed. "But next time we'll be ready, And maybe, just maybe, we'll have new tricks up our sleeves. Nissa nodded, her gaze fixed on the screens. If there's one thing we're good at, it's surprising everyone, ourselves included. With the Vorsh systems reeling and Earth's network stabilizing, the future seemed a little less bleak. They'd proven that even in the darkest moments, humanity could shine. And as long as they had each other, they'd find a way to keep the stars within reach. To unpredictability, Nissa said, raising an imaginary glass. To chaos, Cordell echoed, a smile tugging at his lips. And to the crazy humans who'll never stop fighting, Phelan added, his voice filled with resolve. As they continued to work, the trio knew they were paving the way for a new future, one where humanity wasn't just surviving but thriving. The Vorsh might regroup, but they'd never be able to take away what made humans unique, their ability to adapt, to love, to fight, and to laugh in the face of the impossible. The screens flickered, the digital storm finally settling into a calm sea. For now, they'd won. The battle wasn't over, but they'd shown the universe that humanity was a force to be reckoned with. And as the night wore on, a sense of pride filled the air, mingling with the scent of burnt coffee and the remnants of chaos. They'd done it. They'd taken on the Vorsh and come out on top, and in doing so, they'd proven that sometimes the best way to fight the future was to embrace the unpredictable present. Hey, if we survive this, Cordell said, I'm getting a tattoo to commemorate the occasion. Phelan raised an eyebrow. Of what? A broken algorithm, maybe, Cordell replied, grinning. Or maybe just the word chaos in big, bold letters. Nissa shook her head, amused. Let's focus on surviving first, then you can go crazy with the ink. As they worked through the night, the trio knew that they'd become something more than just rebels. They were the embodiment of humanity's spirit, its courage, its humor, and its unyielding drive to fight against the odds. And no matter what the future held, they'd be ready to face it head-on, with a smirk, a sarcastic comment, and a determination that refused to be extinguished. In the end, they were just three humans against the universe. But that was enough. Because in a galaxy that demanded conformity, they'd proven that being a glorious, chaotic mess wasn't just a weakness, it was a strength. Here's to messing with the universe, Nissa said, voice full of confidence. Here's to us, Phelan replied. And as the digital world around them settled into a tentative peace, the trio knew that they'd written their names in the stars, forever changing the course of history. They were unpredictable, they were emotional, they were human. And that made all the difference.